Testing. Yep. So mic is on, and I will start the presentation officially now. So welcome to the session. I'm really happy to see a lot of enthusiastic people here that are interested in the global data collaborations and maybe specifically the RDA. We put some changes into the agenda after you voted on the session, but since most of the people we recruited had experience with working with the RDA, we think that's a good example, and then we're still going to have reflections on how all of these data communities fit together, and even the ones outside of the data together collaboration. So we're going to use Slido to capture some questions. Please feel free to use it. Then you can ask the questions using the chat while we present, and then we will try to collect them and remember them when we have the discussions at the end. We're going to have a total of 5 speakers, and I'm starting with just a general introduction to these communities. I'm part of the Elixir community as well, but I'm leaving the introduction of the more specific parts to my colleague, who's also here. So for the RDA and the data together collaboration, we have this kind of collaborative document that they have put forward together as just understanding of some common goals and aims for these communities. And there we have CODATA, GoFair, World Data Systems, and the RDA. CODATA and World Data Systems are both parts of the International Science Council. GoFair is a separate initiative that organizes activities on fair implementation and very specific, oftentimes mostly oriented through domain-specific and research communities to arrive on solutions for fair. Research Data Alliance has a broad and general scope, and it's a grassroots organization, so anyone can join. And I think that's a good example in this context. Even though all have shared ambitions, they have a lot of work going on together, and there's a lot in the Research Data Alliance with interest groups and working groups specifically linked to the other data communities as well. So, yep. No, it's not the same as before. The reason why is because this room is not on the list, and then you can just capture this code. Oh. Yeah, did I make that wrong on the slide, or did I copy it wrong?
It should be on conference, so it's just missing.
Yeah. Sorry, and this is going to be wrong in our slide. I'm really sorry about that, but the QR code is correct. So now it should work. Yes, I'm really bad at seeing these small kinds of mistakes, unfortunately. There might be plenty of them in my slides. The Research Data Alliance has described its activities like this in the document. And you can see that the main processes that they have is organizing these working groups and interest groups around certain activities. And then they have something they call task forces. I haven't really been involved in those, but then there's this kind of thing in between with birds of a feather groups, which converge on an idea that they would like to propose that the RDA community adopts. It's been around since 2013, and there's a long tradition of exchange with Elixir, and I think also with the other research infrastructure communities that you're going to get an introduction to soon. There's also a regional office in Europe called the RDA Foundation, and we have Association. Sorry about that. So. Oh, so this is actually print screened from the EOSC Association website. That's not my... Yes, but then you know that you should look into that at least. I mean, as a partner of the EOSC Association, you can see that there is a clear connection between RDA and then there is some sort of support for linking activities across EOSC and to the global communities. Ari is going to talk more about this, so I'm not going to say much about the RDA Tiger project here other than that it is something that supports these kinds of activities. And RDA in practice is basically attending these plenaries, as they call them, which is basically very large-scale meetings where these people who are engaged in interest groups and working groups meet twice a year. These are usually on-site events. They have recently, since the pandemic, started to have virtual options as well. And I think there's been a few virtual-only plenaries as well, which is odd. This is usually kind of on-site, face-to-face meetings. And the groups, they are organized in a structure suggested by the RDA, where you have a charter, then you have 2 to 4 co-chairs normally, and you organize activities around the cycle with the plenaries as the place where you showcase the progress you've done, and the working groups, they have a kind of procedure to review the outputs that they do, and they usually have a schedule of like 18 months. So these support structures help the RDA push the community towards agreeing on conventions and support their work on building and using bridges that enable the open sharing of data. And as you can see, there's over 10,000 members. There's various degrees of activity or activeness, and I mean, people are welcomed on their own terms, regardless if you're window shopping on a plenary or if you're actively contributing to producing one of the outputs. A plenary is an example here. We have 489 on site and 230 online at the RDA plenary in March, which was in Gothenburg. There's people from all over the world, and usually I think it's a bit dominated towards the region where the plenary is located. Now it's going to be 2 times in a row with Europe as the host, so the next opportunity will be easy for us in Salzburg, Austria. And an example of an interest group, which is where I'm coming from, is this Life Science Data Infrastructures interest group, which has collaborators across the world from Australia, Africa, the US, and from slightly different focus points. We had a session at the last plenary, and we have proposed a session for the next plenary. Usually, all of these interest groups and working groups, they organize themselves towards a specific aim. So there's something to guide these sessions as they are proposed. And then this is an example of what the RDA offers. So you get a website where you can present your activities. There's a mailing list linked to this, so you can reach out. And your sessions are also presented on this website. And an example of a session, these sessions are usually recorded, so there's a track of them, there are session notes, and there's a reporting session afterwards. So the community can use this to kind of go back in time and see what has happened in the past. And an example is the Elixir Bridging Force that later turned into this Life Science Data Infrastructures group that has done several joint activities with various interest groups and working groups over the years. And most of this is actually online, so you can go back and see the sessions and the recordings. And I think this is a fantastic resource. And as you can see here, there's a lot of examples of different types of working groups and interest groups. And Elixir has an interest in both these technical, generic kind of groups that focus on a solution that doesn't really rely on a specific domain, but there's also domain-specific communities that you can dive into. Yep. Oh. Sorry. So the slides will be shared as well, as far as I understand. And since we're recording, there will be an opportunity to see this all again if I'm speaking too fast. I mean, some of these might not be active. I've reused this slide a few times before. But the next plenary, that's in October, so it's still open for registrations. You can attend either online or on site, and I would be very happy to see you there and have some discussions there. You will also meet these other communities at that occasion. And with that, I'm going to leave over to Mari to talk about the CESTA perspective.
Yes, thank you.
And I can move the slides.
Great. Yeah, please. So do we do this sitting down or I don't know how?
Choose, please.
I'll sit down. So So thank you for the opportunity to present a little bit on, and I think this will be very superficial overview of CESTA and RDA activities and what we are doing or have been doing. Yeah, next slide. So my name is Mari Klemla. I'm from the Finnish Social Science Data Archive. That is one of the CESTA's national service providers. I'm also the CESTA Tools Working Group Leader, so I'm working really closely with the CESTA main office at the moment. So CESTA is the consortium of European Social Science Data Archives. And as you can see here, we have the CESTA main office that's located in Bergen. And then we have national service providers, basically social science data archives usually and typically. And so CESTA is one of the 24 ERICs in Europe. Next, please. And just a list, you can go through this later, so just to show you. And next, please. So I wanted to have this picture of CESTA history here, because I want to highlight that this CESTA has been in existence basically from the 1970s. It's of course not been an ERIC all the time, but the social science data archives have had this collaboration more or less from the beginning. The oldest social science data archives are from the 50s, from the 60s, and then 70s, 80s you had more and more archives. And we've worked really closely together all that time, and CESTA, not as an ERIC, but as a loose collaboration has existed. So we have actually a lot of European and global level collaboration pre-RDA also, but RDA is a very welcome new opportunity to us. And I might mention some of these later, but yes, thank you. Next. So CESTA and RDA, so we are an organizational member of RDA, and several of CESTA service providers are working in different RDA groups with various levels of activities. So some are window shopping, as you mentioned, and I think that's actually also a very important function. We also, I wanted to mention here that our director is a member of the advisory board of the World Fair project. That is, of course, RDA and CODATA project. And then when it comes to the visions and missions, we are very much aligned. So there's this clearly possibilities for synergy from that viewpoint as well. And when I'm talking about CESTA, I'm talking about both the main office and the national service providers. And that's actually a huge network by itself. And I don't claim to know what all the national service providers are doing. So now I'm talking a little bit from the CESTA main office viewpoint here, but this is all intertwined. So please, next please. So I wanted to highlight actually two RDA outputs that are really adopted by CESTA. And the first one is the COTRA Seal, and this is very close to my heart. I'm also a COTRA Seal board member, and then this has been a really great example of collaboration within RDA and with the umbrella of RDA, so we could get the data seal of approval and the WDS requirements into one, and that's the COTRA Seal as we have it now. And that is something CESTA has adopted, but also Clarin and the social science humanities and also other sectors as well. It's domain agnostic. The other one I want to highlight is the Fair Data Maturity Model Specification and Guidelines. So that is something that aligns with the fair impact use case on the CESTA and the work that the CESTA is doing on the fair data assessment. We are using Fuji tool to test the metadata records in the CESTA data catalog. So this has been. We have also contributed to the metadata standards catalog. I can't say we have really adopted that, but we've been active there as well. And as I mentioned, there are probably several other activities when you talk about, for example, data management and training and so on, where individual CESTA service providers have been active. This is actually something that is, we don't have a clear picture of that, an overview within CESTA, and I think that's something we probably need to do. Next, please. So we do create opportunities for the experts to engage in RDA and in other global activities. So there is information exchange between the CESTA main office and the service providers. We do have regular meetings called Service Providers Forum. We have topical webinars, and I think those are all very good. I think we could be a little bit more organized when we are doing that. And actually, at the moment, CESTA is restructuring the internal organization and how we work and what kind of working groups we have in the future. As you might know, we do have a new director at the moment. CESTA, you will see CESTA people. You will see CESTA people here, but you will see CESTA people in the RDA meetings in Salzburg and in other. So we are very well represented there, I would say. Also, if you look at the list of names, CESTA experts are everywhere, but not everybody is really active necessarily. In addition, I wanted to mention collaborations like IASIST, so that's a conference and an organization that we have been really active. It's sort of RDA for the social sciences. And DDI Alliance, so that's the metadata format, and that's also related to CODATA, and everything is intertwined here again. And of course, EOSC activities, and we've had an internal CESTA trust landscaping activity in the last 2-3 years, and we do sort of list RDA working groups that would be of interest to CESTA, but that's, yeah, we need to go further, I think. I think I have one more slide, maybe. Yeah, some challenges and opportunities. I don't think there are any surprises here. So we do value the opportunity. That's very clear. We want to keep up with the quickly changing landscape. Or even though there have been presentations, I think Susanna was saying in one of the interpreter sessions that she's used one slide for 15 years or something. So some things are not changing, but others are very quickly. But the challenge is in resource allocation. So expertise and the capacity. So we don't have the people necessarily to go, and the travel costs, that's a huge issue. And of course, the maintenance of RDA outputs, I think that's somehow a general challenge. How do you maintain those really, and yeah, sustainability. Yeah, I think that was the last one, was it? Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Daan Broeder. I'm affiliated with the Clarin ERIC. And what's the Clarin ERIC? Next slide, please. This is a minimal slide with all the information I think you need. Could be more, but that would have cost me some extra slides. But let's go over what I think would be interesting to know for this discussion. So we are an ERIC. We are the second ERIC since 2012. We are a distributed infrastructure. Coordinating and working with the long-term national Clarin projects that are really a backbone of centers that support all the Clarin activities. Yeah, it's there in big letters, but let me repeat it. So we are the research infrastructure for language as social and cultural data. That used to be phrased a bit differently. We are the infrastructure for providing language data and language technology for research. Before that, I was yet another phrasing. So this changes from period to period, but this is sufficient there, I think. So we rely on the national projects. These national projects are expected to create centers. We have B centers and C centers. The B centers are really data and service providing organizations, while the C centers, well, they can provide metadata, and then we will be very glad, but we do not even insist that they provide metadata in the Clarin the Clarin format. And then there are K centers, knowledge centers. That is, I think, an increasing activity for Clarin. We see the need there to provide expertise. And it's not as if we say, just do me any website where you, let's say, where you affichate your interest and your knowledge. No, it's really structured. They have to do it according to some requirements. So technical infrastructure of Clarin is aimed at coherent discovery and access of resources. We have a central resource catalog called the Virtual Language Observatory, but there are also general data management tools, such as, for instance, the Clarin Language Resource Switchboard, the Virtual Collection Registry. We collaborate with the other SSH infrastructures, DARIA, CESDA. We had a successful collaboration in SHOC, right, Mari? And wider in the EOS projects. Next slide, please. The RDA background. Now, when you asked me, Walmar, if I would like to contribute to this session, I thought by myself, well, you know, we didn't have any big adoption successes of last years. Is there something to tell? On the other hand, that's also an experience, and I thought maybe I spent also some effort, some creativity on proposing some ways on how things could be improved there. So I take the opportunity to do that in this and other slides. But first, the RDA background. So Clarin has been involved in RDA activities from the very beginning, and that was also very much inspired because we had some people in the organization that were, I think, also instrumental for creating RDA as it came out. What you can see is, if you look at where Clarin people are participating, is that we are more generally interested in data management topics. So think of PIDs, the data type registry, the certification thing. I mean, for me, it wasn't clear that RDA played a role there. I was not involved in, but yes, give credit to who credit becomes here. RDA did a lot there too. So certification, certainly. FIM, Federated Identity Management. I think I was the chair for some time there, just as for the DTR. The data fabric, dynamic citations, I think we collaborated. And that is something we adopted. I think we adopted the recommendation there. But compared to the thematic ones, what you maybe would expect, there is not so much involvement there. The last thing I could see, there is the linguistics data interest group, and we adopted the recommendations for citation of research data in linguistics, but that was mostly the work of one of the Clarin centers, the Norwegian partner there. So Clarin RDA interests are mainly linked to its core business, publishing, discovery, and facilitating access to language data. We don't have an overall coordination with respect to RDA participation. Of course, if I and colleagues arrive there, we say, will you go to that meeting, then I'll go to the other. But that's not really a strategy, right? It's just a matter of distributing few resources in an optimal way. RDA participation is often based on personal interest. If I'm there, and I see there is something that mentions fair digital objects or the DTR, I peek in. So you could call that window shopping, but it's a little bit more than that. And I have to say, I asked around a little bit with managers, but also people from the development group. Clarin is just one of the collaborations and projects we are involved with. So if you ask why is our involvement declining a bit, there is one real good answer, and that's for Clarin-funded projects and the related expert discussions that these projects entail have to take priority with respect to involvement. Simply lack of people. And I think that is the case also for many others, right? Next slide, please. So the perception of RDA within Clarin, and I already mentioned this awareness by management, developers, and researchers. Management is well informed about RDA. They have a bit of long-term memory, while the developers are a bit more separated. Yeah. So RDA doesn't appear often in discussions. Also, I have to say, and that's something for RDA to mind, I think, because some interesting discussions for Clarin moved away from the RDA arena, thinking about data fabric and the fair digital objects. They moved away for obvious reasons. I think we know that. So there is one thing that's really, how do you say, uncontested. When you asked me the last time we met in Gothenburg, why are you here? What do you think? And I said to you, well, this is really an excellent way to encounter colleagues, to see new things that are happening, and a free and open global platform, as I put there in bold text, to discuss technical and non-technical aspects of data infrastructure without that there are repercussions because, well, there is the other project you are involved in and things are going different. You're free, open, and you can engage with other things. And also the networking, the corridors there are just as important as what is being told in the rooms. You hear sometimes complaints. Some of the group events seem to be only promotion of certain projects. I've been there, I've seen it, and yeah, but is that really bad? I mean, you notice it quickly enough, and you can go elsewhere. It's difficult, I think, for RDA management to make a separation, to filter these completely out. I think you're well aware of that is happening. But there is another thing, and that's maybe more something you could help, and that's not always clear what's going on. What are new activities? RDA has grown immensely. I remember the first meeting in Gothenburg and the first meeting in the States, and yeah, you knew what was going on, but that's no longer the case. You have to be.
Parallel rules.
Yeah. Okay, so excellent as a discussion platform and to meet people, fine. But now the RDA direct outcome, there you see, I think, and I heard it also from my colleagues, that there is a perceived lack of direction and progress. Many overlapping activities. They find it difficult to quantify output and alignment. Yeah. So other fora, national and project collaborations such as, well, SHOP, for instance, right? We have our SSH vocabulary commons. And there are more of such discussions. These are more visible within Clarin, and they get more attention. I think that's natural. Next slide, please. So, can we improve things? What would I suggest? Some ideas. So, looking at what Elixir is going to tell, I can predict some things. Some communities and infra seem to be more involved. Biomed, open air. From a need or opportunity, I don't know. I think it's a strategy there, a strategy that Clarin does not have or doesn't see the necessity for. But maybe their RDA activities are also more supported by the bigger Elixir collaboration and coordination. I don't think there is a need for action from you there. You're sailing fairly well. But for others, as already said, in general, there is a lack of expert staff to participate in all projects and discussions. Too many similar events there. I mean, what should we do? We have only so much people. If there is an RDA Netherlands or an RDA Germany that is closer to what the national projects are getting their money from. So I think they would give their priority to those events. And yeah, you can say, well, you can do both, but that's not how it works. It's too expensive, by the way. You mentioned window shopping. Prices have gone up there for window shopping. Yeah. So an idea would be for RDA to have synergy with topics in other but funded projects. So look at what is going on in EOSC project and try to get those topics also on the internal RDA agenda. RDA could there maybe function as a, let's say, a participant, but just more a neutral participant. And there is, of course, the global connection. What is the US doing on that particular topic? So another idea is anchoring explicitly RDA involvement plans in project proposals. If the Commission would strongly suggest to some of the S3s there to really have an RDA strategy, I think such strategies would be forthcoming. Another thing that you could investigate, RDA seems to be an official standardization institute, but I don't think that is then fully exploited.
We are not anymore.
Not anymore, no.
Because the European standardization strategy has changed, but we are now exploring new
Okay, so this is aligned with what you are thinking about. So indeed, investigate what is possible there, because yeah, compared with ISO, you probably miss on all the possibilities that the ISO Secretariat offers, but even if you would succeed in fielding a little bit of such support with respect to standards creation, it would already be helpful to many attempts that could go on for things. Try to look at what EOSC is doing now with the interoperability guideline registry. Maybe RDA could play a role there. So, but ISO, yes, ISO is a different business model. You have to pay for the standards.
And besides, with ISO, it takes 10 years to do anything. So
Well, not always. I managed to get some things done a bit earlier. Yeah. Well, I think the last thing that's there is already mentioned. I myself, I heard two types of criticisms, all right? So there's a perceived lack of direction and sluggishness could be amended at the cost of inclusivity, be more selective about topics, but on the other hand, that would harm the inclusivity, the openness that many people so much like. And with that, that's my last slide. Okay.
All right. So next up is Gavin. Here you go. You can direct your slides yourself.
Okay. Hello, I'm Gavin Farrell from the Elixir Hub. I'm a technical officer on our data and compute platforms based in Kingston, UK. Very briefly, a quick overview of Elixir Europe, what it is. We're a pan-European research infrastructure for life science data. We're focused on life science data resources, anything from databases, software and tools, training resources, and so on, as listed there. And our goal is to start kind of forming a cohesive infrastructure across our 24 member nodes, which are generally member states, and over 245 institutes. And where I am based in the UK, we're the coordinating body at the hub, trying to bring cohesion between our 450 plus services, which we have at this stage. If you want more info on it, just a couple of us here. There's a lot more of us, actually, in fact, even beyond this picture, but we're happy to talk about our projects, Elixir in general, or so on. There's plenty of us here in the room. Volmard, Niels, Frederick, Marique, and probably many others. Elixir and global data communities, so the focus of this actual topic and event. And just to say, Mary and Dan, it was really excellent to see your own perspectives and the challenges highlighted. It's very synergistic and really complementary. Elixir itself, we collaborate globally in the life science data community. We've explicitly our collaborations page, so feel welcome to go onto that. But just some examples of this, looking specifically at us interacting with parallel life science infrastructures. There's the National Institute of Health Office of Data Science and Strategy, Australian Biocommons, H3A Bionet, so very distributed, and also a bit of a parallel to the last session looking at EOSC in a global context. And then other just life science organizations in general and standards bodies, such as the Global Alliance for Genomic Health and Global Biodata Coalition, which works on database accreditation for helping secure funding. But looking at Elixir collaborating globally in the cross-domain community, and specifically the data together collaboration, as Volmar touched on, Elixir definitely has a current RDA focus, but also beyond that to CODATA and the other members of the data together collaboration. And also we do look at EOSC between our projects. We engage in the task forces and the EOSC Association S3 working group, for example. How do we actually do this? How do we engage with these global data communities? We have our Elixir Research Data Alliance Activities Focus Group. So this is it's a meeting point for Elixir members to come together and ensure that we're working with the global Research Data Alliance community, that we're not working in an isolated European bubble, but we're looking cross-domain and looking at other communities beyond ourselves. So again, looking at life science data communities outside of Elixir specifically, who are focused on technical and data aspects and working on data handling. Obviously, life science is our focus for this. But we're also looking beyond to data policymakers and standards and database developers, such as Susanna Sansoni, who's also at this event. There's a fair sharing working group, which ensures at these events and so on that fair sharing is represented as a place to catalog and promote your database resources and standards, and an open forum for investigating and sharing those cross-community, cross-domain. As Volmar also mentioned, we have another large focus of Elixir in the RDA is the Life Science Data Infrastructures Interest Group, which recently started up, which has NIH, Australian Biocommons, and some others as mentioned, which Volmar is our co-chair for that and represents Elixir. So Elixir and the Research Data Alliance Activities Focus Group, in a more practical sense, we have our own website for this off of our Elixir site, and a specific statement on our collaboration with the RDA. We really value the RDA and Elixir, so we formed this kind of meta group where we kind of tried to organize and have a common strategic goal and alignment to how Elixir is engaging at RDA, planning for plenaries, session coverage, and so on. And we have a steering committee who some of these members are in the room and some in other sessions, but specifically Volmar is here, and Susanna Sansone, as I've mentioned, is also around the event. But we have 5 members across Europe helping steer this group. What do we actually do in action? 4 key elements, I suppose. So we meet monthly to discuss, share, collaborate, and coordinate. We also do some surveillance and monitoring. We've had this landscape analysis survey we need to write up and put that out there. We've got about 20 members or so, seeing if they're engaged in the RDA, to what extent, what they're getting out of it, where there's adoption of RDA outputs across our nodes. We also report in each plenary. So since the very first plenary almost a decade ago, we've had an Elixir report to help distill down this information for life scientists and make use of it if they can't attend all these parallel sessions, but see what is of interest to them, and again, from the window shopping aspect that's come up, what they could look at and maybe take on board for themselves in their own work. And finally, we facilitate Elixir travel grants. So there's 2 plenaries a year, and we can facilitate up to 4 Elixir members per plenary to go. So when there's events, for example, in South Korea or so on, we can actually get that person there and have some Elixir representation and engage with these communities outside of Europe and so on. So the plenary reports, I've mentioned 19 to date. You can find them online, but they're also now going on Zenodo, making them a bit more fair, giving them their DOIs. And then further synergies, so just to highlight some synergies, this data together collaboration, these organizations, which are synergistic to EOSC, it's very important from a research infrastructure perspective that there are opportunities that you can leverage between them. As Dan mentioned, there's a lot of in-kind effort as well associated, but there are further opportunities somewhat coming up where you can leverage both as a research infrastructure, data together, and EOSC in a parallel. As I mentioned, we have our Research Data Alliance focus group, but we also at Elixir have our EOSC focus group, where we're engaged and leveraging EOSC in a similar fashion to the RDA. But the benefits of engaging with data together and EOSC as a research infrastructure, I've just listed some examples, but grants come up such as these RDA EOSC ambassadorships, which some of our members have been recipients of. Alison Lister in University of Oxford, Volmar, I believe, also might have been recipient of some of those. There's EOSC Future Interoperability Framework. They had some open grants and calls as well to co-fund some activities through the EOSC Future project, focusing on interoperability. And then other projects, which I think Ari will be touching on, such as the RDA Tiger project, which is a prominent EOSC project that's been co-funded, and World Fair as well, which has quite good visibility in EOSC. And if you're part of those collaborating bodies, obviously there's opportunities then to leverage those grants and activities. But just to highlight from the RDA Tiger side, we have a working group starting up on fair genomic tracks through Sveinung Gundersen and some others at Elixir Norway. Then just to hand over to my colleague, Niels Hoffman from Elixir Germany, to speak from more the node side and the community's perspective.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gavin. So I'm representing Elixir Germany, as Gavin just said. And in Elixir, we have the concept of communities among complementary to the platforms we also have. and the focus groups. So the communities are usually formed around domain experts in Elixir nodes and also include some non-Elixir partners. And I've been highlighting the two communities that I'm mainly involved in, so the proteomics and metabolomics community, mainly concerned with data standardization around mass spectrometry. This is also backed by participation from MBIL EBI's core data repositories like PRIDE and Metabolites, for example. And the communities in Elixir have the mission to provide a mechanism for long-term collaborations with also other research infrastructures and other large-scale initiatives. And I will go into detail about that on these two communities on the next slide. They also drive the service developments in the Elixir platforms, so give input to the Elixir program, for example, also inform the platform program on work package details and what could be realized concerning enabling fair data services, interactions with other large data infrastructures worldwide. And last but not least, they provide a framework to develop and maintain community standards. So there are some rules and requirements to set up a community in Elixir, which are detailed in the community handbook, which I will not go into detail now because of time. But I want to just highlight where basically we are collaborating within these platforms. So I'm also part of the Proteomics Standards Initiative, which is part of HUPO, the Human Proteome Organization, which was founded in 2001 to drive the global proteomics research. And the PSI was developed as a standardization body within this HUPO organizational structure, and currently has 5 active working groups that are concerned with different aspects of proteomics data initially, but nowadays also with things that are involved in mass spectrometry measurements, so small molecules like metabolites and lipids as well, which is my actual background. So within these working groups, specifically in the PSIMS, we are working to form these cross connections also to other communities, driven by the scientific needs that we have. And we are basically a community of, more or less practitioners and people coming from large data repositories, for example. People are there from the Seattle Bioinformatics Institute, which also developed, for example, the Skyline software, and they are also providing a lot of support in supporting open processing of vendor-specific data, but are also interested in developing data standards for global exchange and metadata to annotate the data appropriately. So this is basically a bottom-up collaborative effort. And we have some established processes for that as well. So we have a specification document review process, which involves external reviewers, for example. And I think a lot of the processes are probably very similar to the RDA. So my connection to the RDA so far has been not very deep. So I'm looking forward to actually learning more about potential collaborations and cross-feedings. So I think that's my last slide. And then we can switch over to Ari.
Thanks. This is a little bit of PowerPoint slog for an unconference session, by the way. So I'll try to be very fast with this one now. So just to give you the idea, there's a couple of things what I want to highlight. There's good comments, by the way, what I made notes about, also about what to improve in RDA, and I can answer to some of these if we go in the more discussion mode, but I would like other people to talk as well. But right now, one thing what we can say, there's a couple of things what are improving in RDA. We have, one of them is the RDA Tiger project, which means that you can get support for your working group. So it's not only completely voluntary run, but we have also a facilitator and a communication help and other help for the working group action. So it lowers the barrier to start and run a working group. Hopefully that will help. And you can also actually apply for example, you need a consultant or somebody to do certain testing for the project, or to do some sort of, for example, adoption or technical demonstrator. Here's another slide of that one. So basically, you have a facilitation, communication, output services, and landscape and engagement service, which is a little bit experimental, which is basically we are trying to actively find members for your working group, so also outside of the RDA community. Let's see how that works. But anyhow, that's the idea. You have to apply for it if you have a working group plan. It doesn't have to be yet a working group. You just have an idea for a working group. But this is only for working groups currently, how it is written, just for you to know. So please apply it. We have a booth there if you want to know more. just very briefly, we run, just to show some activities, I think I was asked to also present some other activities, what we have done with the EOSC. One key point was the EOSC Future Grants Program. And we funded a lot of different activities, which I especially like the domain ambassador ones. So we try to find domains which are not yet connected to EOSC and to RDA, and trying to find people who could connect us to both somehow, or they domain into these fields. And I think that, of course, finding this kind of engagement is extremely valuable, and I hope we can keep this kind of connectivity with all of these people. And very briefly, we also have more information about this also in the booth. If you're interested, go check it tomorrow, for example. Is about the World Fair project, where we have this kind of specific, this is done, by the way, together with the CODATA, with the idea of kind of doing specific fair implementation profiles for certain fields of science. And importantly, this is a global project. This is not a European project. So these things are done in a global level, usually using some sort of global organization who is responsible anyhow for that, or is somehow representative of that community. For example, for chemistry, it's UPAC. And so you have this kind of for agriculture and food, it was the FAO. So you have things which have certain level of authority there. And they do these fair implementation profiles. So idea of how fair is implemented at the moment in that field, and mapping this kind of thing, which would hopefully create this kind of cross-domain interoperability framework. But frankly, this is a two-year project, 1 year done. I'm happy with the fair implementation profiles, what we get. So that was what I had, but I would much more like to have some conversation here.
So I'm handing over to Niels, but I just wanted to mention, since you said fair implementation profiles, that's also very closely related to Go Fair. So
yeah, thank you everybody for presenting your involvement with RDA, and we now want to open the panel, and maybe there are some questions already from the audience that we can start off with.
Thank you. Great presentations. So my job is a little bit understanding what's happening out there and try to make researchers' lives easier. And I often get very confused because it seems that there's so many players with so many mandates, often overlapping in terms of function, in terms of what they do. And I get confused, so I wonder how a researcher who's trying to get their footing into, fair data and standard, what's your perspective of the future? How do we avoid stepping on each other's toes? I understand that there are priorities nationally for different member states and other organizations, but how do we move into a more integrated, streamlined, easy-to-use, researcher-centric, whatever ecosystem this is, how do we get there?
Thanks. Who wants to answer? Ari?
Well, I don't have a complete answer for you, of course, but I do completely recognize what you mean, because especially when you're coming, I think Europe is particularly problematic right now, because you have also all the EOSC activities, you have the national activities, and then you have all these global activities, which sometimes you can approach from the CODATA, and sometimes you approach them from the RDA perspective, depending where you come, or then you come to your disciplinary group on American Geophysical Union because you're Earth system scientist and you look from that perspective. I can tell you that there is not a solution at the moment, but I would really like to have a way of kind of a roadmap that if your problem is such that it's best approached by, let's say, this kind of bottom-up approach of RDA in a global level, then the RDA is probably the best way to solve it. But if your problem is really domain-specific thing and you have a strong domain community existing, perhaps going to the infrastructure, your own infrastructure, or then to your own scientific community might be most valuable way of doing it, hoping that community is somehow also then interacting with these other players. And that is the network what we don't yet have completely. So this is at least my perspective here.
Okay, let me voice maybe something controversial in this. You mentioned, what was it again, ecosystem. An ecosystem, the beasties eat one another, that's one thing. Right, life sciences, okay. And there is a process of what they call creative destruction. And I don't say it's ideal, and it's not good for the researchers, certainly not. But maybe we are still in that phase where it has to become clear who are the winners or the most useful organizations here. And I think there is a danger if you try to design the landscape in a way that's fully complementary, where there is no, how do you say, no competition over the boundaries. Is that controversial enough or no? Okay.
So I know there are questions from the audience, so I will just very shortly. So thank you for the question, I think, point on. And when it comes to ecosystem, I have a couple of things. So first one is, I know RDA has been accused of not having enough researchers within it. But then from an infrastructure viewpoint, I mean, how much do the researchers really need to know about the infrastructure or metadata standards or that kind of thing? They just need to do it, and they need to have the tools to do it and the services so that they can do research. And everything else is handled by the infrastructures magically somehow. And the other thing is, I can see the bottom up, but I think we need also from top to because I mean something that is useful now, great, but we also need to think what is useful in 10 years, 15 years, and that's not necessarily coming from bottom up always. So I don't think we answered your questions, but it's interesting, and I think the people we see here, we will see in Salzburg in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we maybe want to move over to the next question, maybe.
Just a very quick comment. Yeah. So, I mean, you saw the collaborators we have globally, NIH, Australian Biocommons, etc. We are collaborating with the same people in the Life Sciences Data Infrastructures Group, and we are discussing topics that might be of relevance to other communities as well. So, I mean, it's a way of bringing the same discussions, but into another arena as well.
Okay, thanks. We have another question here.
Hi, so Louise Bezedno-Dunce. I'm also the co-chair of the Organizational Assembly of the Research Data Alliance, which I think is often overlooked as a very important body. So the Research Data Alliance is a network of institutions who show their support for the RDA by paying a small membership fee to join every year. And this membership fee is incredibly critical to the financial operation of the RDA, but it's a really great way of getting the institutions actually more embedded in the activities of the RDA. We have a monthly meeting where the RDA Secretary General, Hillary, gives an update. We get a TAB update. We get a RAB update. We also get specific working groups presenting activities. We get an overview of all the current outputs that are going to be ratified, an opportunity to comment on them. So it's a really important way of actually knowing what's going on in the RDA. And Dan, you were saying, that sometimes you feel a little bit isolated. So I'd like to compliment CESDA on actually being an OA member and put it out to the other ERICs, that Elixir is not an OA member and hopefully will become soon, but also it's an opportunity to get the institutions that are represented through your ERICs to join the organizational assembly and therefore be a bit better connected to the RDA and connect that top-down and bottom-up approach. So just being slightly out there and putting it there.
So perhaps I can respond for Elixir. As far as I know, or maybe you have the political correct answer here.
So this might have come up in other EOS sessions, but we also don't have a direct legal entity. So we operate under EMBL EBI. We're not an ERIC structure either. We're an international organization. So certain things are a bit more difficult. And I know it's come up as a topic before, and it's something that we keep an eye on, and our Chief Technical Officer observes and monitors. And yeah, definitely for future consideration.
Is it also possible to promote the OA to your member organizations? it would be really helpful to promote it to your member organizations so that they could be a little bit more involved.
I can maybe address this. I'm Frederic Koppens. I'm head of Node for Elixir Belgium, so I'm part of the scientific committee within Elixir. So we discuss these kind of things. We have activities. I don't recall membership of RDA being have come up, but there's the legal stuff, so it's anyway difficult. I think a direct question would be, and can we promote this for the institutes? We could. Why should we? What is the added benefit? We need that information, and I think, yeah. So and that's really important because, and I mean the same goes for EOSC. So why should we bother? Because as I mean I can relate to what Dan said. There's a lot of things going on, and you need to make choices. And I'm not saying that RDA is not the right choice, but for some people it will be, and for others it will not be. What are the arguments? And that's something we really need, and I think in general we're open for that.
All right, so I think we had one. Yeah, sure.
Retort here about not knowing what's going on. So I'm not talking about how do you say the administrative or the strategic decisions of RDA here. No, I'm talking about if you are coming there as an expert every year, you then it's not always clear what's going on, what new groups have been formed, or what's going on. It's simply too big to know that.
I'm looking here if anybody has hand up, because I can comment on that one though, that hopefully we are now building a maintenance facility for the outputs, which will hopefully, this graph database will contain the information. So it's, no, yeah, Drupal is out. So that I can tell you.
Okay, I think we had one further question from the audience, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, I wanted just to even more controversially comment on the first question about so many infrastructures being built around. So I'm sorry because I love all of you, but grow up. It will be like that because we are living in a civilization where we have competition everywhere. Children, and it's very important, are being taught how to value the information and data found in the internet. We have to learn to do the same, evaluate against our parameters that we found important and choose the infrastructures we found important. And I believe that, or I know, that none of the infrastructures out there yet is at its top level of evolution, and I believe that we will get there together, that in the end, everywhere will have a place to go and be supported from no matter where the scientist is coming from. And it will be due to mutual respect and good dissemination and good job that we will done first. And that's it.
I could add there that the RDA has to me, okay, many great benefits, but to me, one thing which is missing from many other organizations is that it's truly global. I know several regions where you don't have actually any other platform for, at least for some sciences, and they have to use RDA to connect to international, or even regionally to each other, because there is no EOSC in there. They don't have a EOSC symposium. They instead come to the RDA plenary or the regional RDA meeting, because that's the only way. So that's one of the great benefits of RDA, is that then you will connect to these communities which you could not do. But of course, some things you have to do in the EOSC symposium, and it's probably much more effective to do it in here. Yeah, good.
But it's all interconnected in the end.
Absolutely, everything is interconnected.
Yeah, so, I mean, regarding assessment of what's valuable, as a person working in infrastructure as well, you can assess, so is this window shopping providing any value to me? And then based on kind of some window shopping, you might notice that there's a history behind that where you can find examples of projects that have solved similar problems that you have are struggling with, but in a different discipline. So, I mean, I have found that to be a very useful thing with the RDA sessions, that I mean, I don't necessarily know what I'm looking for when I'm going to the RDA all the time. Some sessions I have targeted, other sessions I stumble into, and then there turns out to be something interesting because you are there and you're talking with people in the corridors. So, I mean, as infrastructure staff, there's this what's it called? I mean, personal development aspect to it. So that I think could also be a component, not specifically like we are agreeing on standards here, but also developing our staff.
If I may join that sentiment, some more context about what's actually being discussed in the groups would be helpful. I mean, some of them have an RDA history, so are the second or even third iteration of some activity. Others are new, but they have context in maybe other organizations. So maybe some longer descriptions could be helpful.
So maybe
And this graph database hopefully helps with that as well.
So I think in the interest of time, we all have to almost wrap up.
Yep.
Maybe one final question. How do you think should RDA move towards engaging with outside communities in the future? Try to actively recruit or contact them, help them to onboard into specific interest and working groups? Or, I don't know, do some other more directed interactions maybe with Elixir or other larger infrastructures to drive the recruitment process a bit more?
I can just tell you my own view here. This is not some sort of official RDA policy, but this is what I try to do, actually. One part of that is the RDA Tiger thing. We are hoping to get new working groups, and then we are using their connections to connect, advertise them that the RDA exists for the group people who are not yet aware of it. But I think for one good example, though, what is really kind of pragmatic is that I'm flying on Friday from here to Tenerife to meet on the ESFRI meeting, which I've been now always trying to get into somehow and push for the infrastructures. I mean, you are good examples, good infrastructures, yes, but there is a lot of other infrastructures inside Europe which don't use RDA for absolutely nothing, and they are not even sometimes aware of it. So this is one angle what I'm trying to reach, but I do think that they would be also much benefit, especially with the larger ones which have a lot of national nodes, to approach them more, let's say, organized way. I could see that as well.
Okay, so we have one more question from the audience.
Maybe I can add that ambassadors are actually doing this job, and I can imagine which of the infrastructures you actually have in mind. So we are trying to bring new communities in, not only in terms of domains, but also in terms of countries and regions to connect these newcomers. It's a difficult job, yeah.
Regarding the calls, by the way, the support. I received one of them. It was not an ambassadorship, it was the interoperability framework one. And it's been a blowtorch to actually have me be more outgoing and I mean, delivering on the commitments that I have made to the RDA-related activities. So, I mean, that actually reserves some time and space, and I mean, your ambitions that might need to take the backseat to project initiatives, that gives you this space, and I mean, you have said that you're going to do this, so in order to not be shamed, you will need to contribute to the RDA community, and I think that's a good opportunity. And I mean, encouraging people or yourselves considering applying for these grants, I think would be very useful.
We have to hope that we get some more funding for such grants. I really like that program.
All right, I think if we don't have any further questions, let's wrap up the session. Thank all the speakers again.
Ari, any final word, or are we done?
I think it might be too late, but next month in Salzburg, we have a plenary. Try that. If you aren't planning it already, remote is also a possibility. So it's a hybrid. And then also there is another one on February, which is completely remote. So there is no physical part on that plenary. So check the website and new groups and come to visit our booth. Did you have a question there?
Yeah, I want to only say some critics. So the fee for Salzburg is 700
I can tell you that the participation fee is not decided.
Okay, good.
It was the local organization, and Okay, this is recorded. I'm not saying anything more.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but this is really ridiculous. I can anyway not go, but my boss would say no. You can go to 3 other conferences.
But is it also the hybrid thing that is making it
Sorry,
cost higher?
the things.
Also participation fee doesn't have any of the cost of participation. That's
Oh.
why everyone is so expensive.
Exactly. And the other big
I didn't know that.
topic is to
Oh, I didn't know
include the global south. So there was one